Hi, everyone, and welcome to another thrilling episode of the Cloud to Ground podcast presented by Spanning. If you're using Google Apps at work or at school or at home, make sure your files are protected by visiting spanning.com and signing up for a 14-day free trial of Spanning Backup and see if it's right for you. I'm your host, Andrea Bridges-Smith, and with me today is Mr. Derik VanVleet, Director of Cloud Strategy at Cloud Sherpas. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Derik.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, as any seasoned listener or viewer of the show knows, we have to start out by establishing your cloud expertise. So, how long have you been working in the cloud?
So, I've been with Cloud Sherpas about 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent a large number of years in the Microsoft ecosystem, sort of before cloud, really took off. It was kind of in the early BPOS Office 365 days, so back when they were trying to figure it out.
Okay, great. So you've got a couple years of experience under your belt. You've kind of seen the growth from infancy to, are we at maturity yet? I don't know.
No, not quite yet, but yeah.
We're headed in that direction.
That's right. It's more than just a buzzword now.
Absolutely. Okay, good. So it sounds like you've got some cloud experience under your belt. I'm going to go ahead and declare you an official cloud expert. And
Fantastic.
There's no medal, there's no trophy, but the next time you're in Austin, I will buy you a beer. I will buy you lots of beers, in fact.
No problem. I love Austin.
It's not completely worthless. So.
That's right.
So before we get to the good stuff, and first of all, let me say that I'm really excited to talk to you because we share a mutual passion, which we'll get to later. But first of all, tell me a little bit about what Cloud Sherpas does and what you do over there. And just a quick disclaimer for all of our viewers and listeners, Cloud Sherpas is one of our partners, and they're a terrific company to work with.
Yeah, so Cloud Sherpas was founded in about 2007 by 3 guys here in Atlanta. And we've quickly grown to one of the world's leading cloud services brokerage. So we have 3 main industry practices, that being Google, another being Salesforce, and the third being ServiceNow. So we are a pure cloud company, sort of born and raised in the cloud, if you will. And then my role as Director of Cloud Strategy is reporting to the Office of the CTO, David Hoff, who's one of the founders. And my primary responsibility is really around Microsoft Compete for the Google business space, again, having that background. So I do a lot of sales, training, education, kind of keeping an eye on the market, white papers, blogs, etc.
Okay, great. And so I did a little bit of research on you online. Some people might call it e-stalking. I just looked at your LinkedIn profile, so nothing too scary. But I see that you used to be a sysadmin back in the day. And that role, of course, has some, shall we say, unique pains that go with it. So how does that experience kind of play into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so, seems like forever ago I was a systems administrator for a pretty large bank in the Southeast. So one of the advantages there is when I talk with customers and we're talking with the system administrators or even the IT management team, I have direct experience in dealing with the challenges that they have today. So some of the common terminology or common themes in terms of doing more with less and those sorts of things, I get pretty much instant credibility because I've done it. I know what they're experiencing and I know what they're going through in sort of this transition and this thought process of going from on-premise messaging or whatever it is to the cloud or whatever they choose, and I can help guide them through some of that decision process as well as things that they need to be on the lookout for since I've done that.
So this idea of doing more with less, that seems like it's something that's pretty universal to anybody out there. On our last podcast, we had a a tech coordinator from a school in Colorado, you know, and of course in the education world, they're always trying to do more with less. So
Yep.
is that something that you kind of see across all of your clients, across, you know, pretty much with everybody?
Pretty much with everybody, right? Yeah, and you know, cloud and the cloud technology, the mass scales that you have today. If you think of Google Apps and just the mass scale that Google has, companies now, CIOs specifically, are coming to the realization that, hey, I'm not an email company. I can't do email as well as like Google can. Why am I in this business? I can repurpose those administrators to do, my company makes widgets. Why don't I repurpose these guys to help find the best and most efficient way to make widgets instead of backing up my on-premise mail system every night? It doesn't make sense, and I think that they're quickly realizing, based on the economies of scale, that it doesn't make sense for them to be in that business anymore.
So what was it like moving from a traditional Microsoft-based IT setup to a cloud setup where you're working now every day?
So the transition for me was pretty straightforward, but what I explain to a lot of customers is when you go from this traditional back office software environment, file server, SharePoint, email, and so forth, and you go to cloud, you have these series of what I call aha moments, where the way you used to do things, for example, accessing your on-premise SharePoint or file server, you have to have your VPN client, your VPN in to access those resources. And now, being in a pure cloud environment, when I was kind of going through my orientation, one of the first things I looked for was a VPN client, and I was like, aha, I don't need one. It's all in the cloud. It just works. So you have these series of aha moments throughout, going from organizing email and just being absolutely psychotic about creating folders or filters and organizing my email to going, I don't organize anything anymore. I just search for whatever I'm looking for. So you just have these series of aha moments and incremental points of efficiency where, like I mentioned, I don't organize email anymore. I just search, even if I don't know what I'm looking for. I just type in, as if I were doing a Google search on the web. I don't have to know what I'm looking for in order to get results and hone in on what I'm looking for. So it was a very freeing reality because, again, I'm device agnostic. I can be on a Mac, I can be on a tablet, I can be on a just a mobile phone, I can be on a Windows PC. And here in the office, I use primarily Chrome devices, Chromebook, Chromebox. And when I go to customers, I think one of the more compelling things is I don't always take a machine with me, a laptop, because I can just grab somebody in the room that brings one and literally just use any device in the room to do my demo, presentation, or whatever it is I'm doing. And I think that's pretty compelling for the customer as well, because there's no way they could do that in the way they work today.
Yeah, so just a quick note for the folks who are very OCD like myself, you still can organize psychotically if you would like to. I do that every day. I have a lot of folders, so you can still do that with the cloud, so don't freak out.
I started doing that, again, coming from the Outlook world. I had folders for all my customers, rules based on where I was getting mail from or whatever. And I felt like, wow, I'm in Gmail. I should probably create all these labels and all these rules. And I started doing it, and about 10 minutes later, I thought, what am I doing? and I just stopped. And so now I search for everything. But that's just something that's just me.
Okay. I'm the type of person that right now I have 20 emails in my inbox, and it's making me kind of itch a little bit. I got down to 4 last week, so if that tells you anything about how fun I am at parties. Also, what you were talking about with the aha moment, I definitely know what you're saying there because when I started working here in January of this year, um, I came from, very traditional, Outlook, um, Microsoft Office kind of environment, and came here. And one of the things that was kind of my aha moment was I kept hitting Command S to save my files just out of reflex because I was so used to losing my work in the middle of it that, saving every so often had become this reflex. And so I kept
Hmm.
doing it even though it wasn't saving or doing anything. So at this point, I should probably explain the mutual passion that I referred to earlier. Um, as anyone who has listened to or watched the show before probably has gathered, I hate Microsoft products, and I think that they die constantly in the middle of you trying to get work done. They don't do what you're trying to get them to do, even though the capability is clearly right there and it's supposed to be doing that. And I have spent a lot of hours saying four-letter words to my computer whenever Microsoft was involved. And I think the only other person who shares my deep passion for disliking Microsoft is Derik here. So, Derik, tell us what you hate most about Microsoft products.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, so use the term dislike immensely, right?
Hmm.
Try not to hate too much other than Brussels sprouts, I guess. But yeah, the one thing, wow, that's you're gonna narrow me down to that. We have a guy in our office here that kind of, he's got a shirt that explains it pretty well. He's got a shirt that says Patch Tuesday made me go Google. And
Hmm.
I think that's a huge thing for me is you have all these different products in their portfolio. I mean, they've got a bloated product set, and there's a lot of duct tape and baling wire that happens in the background to keep these things, quote unquote, integrated. Versus say Google, where a lot of they're just kind of built from the ground up to be integrated. But the whole concept of having to reboot and patch and reboot, and the patch didn't work, and so now you've got to roll back that patch, and which I've been having a lot of problems with lately, just drives you crazy. You just want to turn on a device, connect to the internet, and just have it work. Um, with all this sort of client side, download this, flash that, those sorts of things, and that absolutely drives me crazy. And after being out of that world now for a couple of years, when I grab a Windows machine, 9 times out of 10, if I boot it up, the first thing it kicks off is Windows Update must restart to apply, and I'm going, oh my gosh, and then I just throw it back in the closet and give up. So that's probably the biggest problem that I have. Um, you made me choose one.
Yeah, I know this sounds, maybe like not the biggest problem in the world, but I really hate any kind of software update. It always pops up in the middle of me doing something else. You never log into your computer to do software updates.
Yeah,
You log into your computer or your device or whatever to do something else, to get work done or to look at Facebook way more than you should be, or, there's a lot of reasons. A software update is never one of them. And so every time one pops up, it's like, this is okay, user experience. Think about the user experience. This doesn't
exactly.
fit into the user experience anywhere. And I love that Google has just kind of taken that away. I don't know when they update stuff, and I don't care, and I don't know what updates they did. And I do care about that, but I can read about it on TechCrunch or on their blog or whatever.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's distracting for a user. You're trying to do something, and then boom, there's the pop up. Hey, there's a new update. It's like, again, really? And today is Tuesday, so there's all kinds of new ones coming out, I'm sure.
Well, luckily, I will not have to pay any attention to them.
We'll read about all the ones that went bad tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So, how do you think that Office 365 and Google apps stack up against each other, in terms of the functionality that you get, as well as, how well they perform?
How Microsoft 365, Office 365, and Google are different, and work in the cloud. One of the biggest differentiators for me between 365 and Google Apps is the fact that 365 is not cloud technology, right? By Microsoft's own admission, Office 365 is really the same software packages, bits and bytes that you as a customer could install in your own data center and run, versus Google, which was built, in this huge, massive, scaled-out, multi-tenant environment, designed from the ground up as a cloud platform. What Microsoft is doing is really nothing more than hosted services. Hosted services with limitations. So if you're running SharePoint online, for example, or you're running SharePoint on premise and you've got a nice workflow, custom workflow, custom application that you've developed in SharePoint on premise, chances are you're not going to be able to run that in SharePoint online because it's restricted because of the multi-tenancy and just the overall architecture limitations that they have. They don't allow you to do a lot of customization. Versus Google, which one thing that customers lose sight of pretty quickly, or you just sort of forget, is Google is a platform. The whole thing is a platform. You can customize just about anything in there you want, more so than you can 365. So I think architecturally is a huge differentiator. And if you do some basic metric testing, it becomes very apparent. For example, just doing some basic monitoring of the two platforms just to get to the landing pages where you would log in. Microsoft is roughly somewhere between 3 and almost 4 times as long to get to their login page from a latency perspective. Now you think, well, that's not a big deal. It's a big deal. We just talked about user experience, and today when people, because of Google now, when you type in a search and it says 1,200 million results in 0.20 seconds, right? That's what people expect. And when it takes you, roughly a second and a half to load the login page to log into 365, users notice that. They notice that big time. And that doesn't even include logging in. So the architecture, the massive scale are the biggest ones. Microsoft likes to talk about, Office 365, you don't have to train your users because they're familiar with it. No. If anybody has seen the latest, and this is crazy to say, the latest version of their cloud offering in 2013, it is absolutely nothing like what most customers are on, which is probably 2007. Even if you're on 2010, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't act completely the same. So that is just absolutely false and is a huge caution flag for customers. But those are some of the biggest differentiators. But the uptime and availability, which I've blogged about in the past, and you can read about how we're sort of monitoring that. Microsoft is a little ambiguous in how they're calculating that. For example, SharePoint Online has been in service degradation mode for 6 or 7 days now, but they never call it a service interruption, and they don't offer credits on that. Why not? Yet they claim to have their 99.98% uptime. So it's just a little bit how they handle that and how they define it and what the definitions of that are. I always caution customers, take a look at that very closely. Sign up for a trial account if you want, just so you can see the dashboard and, and just look at, there's dots everywhere constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that let's see, I've been here for 10 months now, working on Google all day, every day. And I think in that time there was about a 2-hour period where my emails were delayed, and that was it.
Yeah.
And in the Microsoft environment, the server was constantly, seemed like it was always going down. So
Yeah,
there's
and
lots of
that's
outages.
yeah, and again, from a user perspective, I mean, if you look at their dashboard, it'll say service degradation, email timely, delivery timeouts, those sorts of things. That's frustrating as all get out to a user. Google recently had their little, you know, latency issue here, and I think they deemed that as a service interruption. That happens every week on the Microsoft platform, and they never call it an interruption. They call it service degradation. So, be careful what you're paying for.
Well, that kind of starts to get to another aspect of Microsoft that I wanted to ask you about, which is their culture, which,
Mm-hmm.
you hear about some of their cultural practices, and it's a little like interesting. So I'm pretty sure that you've heard of their stack ranking system with their employees.
Absolutely.
So for anybody who's out there who might not be familiar with it, the idea is that everyone at Microsoft gets ranked in their team. So if there's 4 people on a team, one of them is the best and one of them is the worst, and 2 of them are in the middle, even though all 4 of them may be really, really good at their jobs. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it sounds sort of good on paper, and I think it's been pretty well documented in the last few months of just from former employees of just the culture that it led to everybody working in silos. So if you and I are on a team and I have a great idea, my great idea directly correlates to my performance review and my bonus. So why would I share that with you, right? Unless I'm just the nicest person on the planet. But so I think it leads to these silos of people not wanting to collaborate with individuals. And competition is good, but competition is only good if those who are actually working and performing are rewarded, collaboratively, and it just killed innovation. Nobody wanted to, work as a team to get things done. And so everybody was doing things individually. And I think if you just look at their products in the last 10 years almost, there's not really much innovative things that have come out of that, unless, the Xbox Kinect is kind of neat, but, nobody, that's not an enterprise thing. But if you look at the enterprise space, they haven't innovated anything in a long time. It's all been through acquisition. And I think that stack ranking just crushed the innovative and collaborative spirit of the company. And I think now that obviously Ballmer is leaving, that will be subject for review and change as well.
Well, it's like they always say, working in silos is the future of the modern workplace. Um, you know, People say no. No one ever says that. That's
I was like, are you going to quote your source there? Because I don't think so.
no one has ever said that. That is a thing that I definitely made up just now. So getting outside of Microsoft for just a minute, as much fun as it is to talk about them, and I could all day, what other companies are out there in the cloud right now that you think are really doing some innovative stuff that we should keep our eye on?
Obviously, Google's doing some pretty innovative stuff with their various projects, such as their balloon projects and glass and so forth. But I think one of the areas that I see a lot of opportunity is things move over to the cloud are folks like yourselves, like Spanning, that are doing what it's traditionally been back office sort of technology and porting it to the cloud. So you see technology such as, the backup disaster recovery moving to the cloud. You see, networking moving to the cloud, conferencing, those sorts of things. Because I think from an enterprise perspective, those are the sorts of things that people can, relate to. Like messaging is pretty easy, but at the same time, you have the server huggers that are a little bit scared. Server huggers being the guys that want to go in and hug their server. They want to go touch the server, right? So they're afraid to relinquish that power to the cloud. But slowly, I think you're going to see, like I mentioned, hey, we're not in the email business. Let's move it to the cloud. I'm not in the networking business. Let's move it to the cloud. I think those are the ones to, from a kind of innovative standpoint, to keep an eye on. But I think a lot of the sort of what's next is probably not even thought of yet. There's a lot of companies that are coming out with cloud-based office productivity suites. We've seen more of that. Google, obviously, and then Microsoft retrofitting web apps, Fox here recently, and then a bunch of others. That's going to be an interesting space to watch. But yeah, I think those that are migrating traditional back office technologies to the cloud are some of the big winners.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like, the cloud lately is the answer to a lot of problems. And, it's interesting to think about which problems it's going to solve for us next. It seems like there's a lot of people out there kind of thinking about that and thinking about, what are the pains in the neck that, the cloud could make less painful. So I, for one, am thrilled that that industry is out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, yay, job security. Derik, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And for anybody who needs some help getting into the cloud, you should look up cloudsherpas.com. They are a wonderful company to work with. They will take your hand and gently lead you up the mountain of cloud integration like a Sherpa.
That's right.
I believe is the idea. And they're just generally a nice bunch of folks. You should definitely consider doing some business with them. And to all of you out there in podcast land, I want to thank you for listening and watching. This show is really fun to do, and it's nice to see people out there enjoying it. So thank you very much. As always, if you're one of those people who likes having your files in the same place where you left them the last time that you looked at them, please visit us at spanning.com and check out a 14-day free trial of Spanning Backup to see if it's a good solution for keeping your files safe and in the same place. My name is Andrea Bridges Smith. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.